Hello, everyone. My name is Anna. I'm the social media manager of VTC, and I'm coming to you with a talkback with the cast and crew of 2XYX. And now to kick it off, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin and Coover, our two dramaturgs.
Hello, hi, I'm Kevin Michaud, co-dramaturg on 2XYX. Pronouns he, him, they, them. I go to SUNY New Paltz. I'm a soon-to-be junior. To you.
Hi, I'm Coover. I'm in sophomore at SUNY Oswego. I'm also a co-dramaturg. Pronouns he, him, his. That's about it for me.
Okay, and we'll start with introductions from our panel. We'll start with Gabby.
Hi, I'm Gabby. I was a scenic designer for 2XYX. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. I'm a recent graduate from Montclair State. I believe that's it.
Okay, Julia.
Hi, I'm Julia. My pronouns are she, hers, and I play the professor, and I'm going to be a junior at New Paltz as well.
Okay, Elizabeth.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Adams, and I was the stage manager, and I graduated in 2019 from Missouri Western State University.
Okay, Connor.
Hi, my name is Connor Thiel, he, him, his, and I'm the lighting designer for 2XYX. I'm a recent alumni of SUNY New Paltz as well.
And last, Amanda.
Hi, I'm Amanda Frank, and I am a recent graduate from Montclair State University.
Okay, so we're gonna go back and forth. Me and Cooper are gonna ask you guys questions. And so my first question before we talk about the intricacies of the piece or any themes or anything, I just wanted to get how you guys adjusted from how you guys adapted to working in this new format. I just wanted to hear how that went for you guys overall. If you got, raise your hand if you'd like to say something. I'll call on you. So Gabby.
Hi. For me, at first I was a little overwhelmed. And then I was like, oh, it's like what I do, but now there are really no limits. So at Montclair, we do a lot of paper projects. We have a lot of design classes. And so I kind of took it on like a project from one of those classes. And I started how I would go through that process of like research. And in those, obviously, we don't have a director or a team. And then I took on my experiences from working in teams for other designs. So it's kind of like a combination of my previous experiences and just trying not to panic and be like, oh no, I've never done this before, but really just going head on and trying my best and see what happens.
Yeah, I definitely think like working in this format, it's a lot of the main adaptation is just like communication wise, like you're really doing the same work. It's just how you communicate with the people you're working with. Like there's a little bit more hiccups in it and a lot more emails. Well, same amount of emails, kind of a lot of emails either way. But let's see, from the acting side, Julia, how did it go for you adapting and working in rehearsal with your director?
Yeah, when it first started, it kind of felt, a little normal because normally we start with table reads and, no one's off book or anything like that. But then towards, getting off book and being like in the moment more, it became a little more apparent how important to me eye contact is and physical connection with people and, being in the room with people, seeing their body language so that you can react to what they're doing. So that was kind of difficult. And also I would just stare at myself. I would, have to like X out of Zoom or put the script in front of it because then I was just so, drawn to myself. And, but then with that, it's like, okay, now I need to look at my fellow actors and stop staring at myself. But that sounds so vain, but it's the truth. So.
Yeah, well, when you see yourself acting in the corner of the screen, it's like, it's not like you see yourself during a rehearsal, like maybe in like when you're working in like film, like you might look back at a take, but like during theater, it's like you don't have that opportunity. So it's definitely something you need to adjust to when you're working in this new format. And it's quite wild. Any other people that would like to touch upon their experience? Okay, Connor.
So it's my second time working with VTC, and in a sense, it never gets easier. It's always a little awkward in the beginning, getting used to Zoom, trying to get everyone on the same page and speaking the same language, but that's sort of universal of putting together any creative team. So I also found it really freeing. Like Gabby said, you can kind of do whatever you want. You make up the space, you make up the rules. As long as everyone else is on board with what you're doing, you can really do whatever we want. And I think that's exactly what we did with this project. We sort of pushed it to the limits, and I'm really proud of what we did.
Well, anyone else, or would we like to move on to the? Okay, Amanda.
So I honestly, it's kind of the same. I really enjoyed the amount of creative freedom that we were able to have with this, because I never thought in a million years I would be able to design a robot, like design what an entire robot aesthetic looks like. But it's also really cool to have that experience of being able to dress people from such a limited wardrobe that I myself cannot see. So I was only able to work with whatever the actors actually had, and then we just went from there, and I still was able to get what I was going for. So that was really cool too. And then it was also really cool to just work with a bunch of people from a bunch of different time zones. Like the fact that our director's from Australia still blows my mind.
Yeah, led to a lot of scheduling hiccups, but in the end it worked out. Anna, you have something to say?
Yeah, it was really fun to just see people that you don't normally get to work with, because I find like student and early career, you get stuck in like your own bubble and you're working with like the same people all the time. But I'm like, I've been looking at some of the work done with this project and some other projects, and I'm like, what's the designers at Montclair State got going on? There's a lot of cool stuff happening over there. So it's just been a joy to kind of see the way everyone takes things on differently, because as theater makers and creators, like we learn from each other in our own individual processes. So it's really refreshing in that way.
Yeah, it was definitely a fun to figure out, like there were a lot of similarities but a lot of huge differences and different ways and different steps that we came upon as we were doing the process, like things we would never think we had to do, especially like with Amanda having to adapt the wardrobe and work with each actor one by one to figure out what they had in their closet and all that, and Connor setting up the lights. And so that was really fun. But okay, so we'll move on to our next question from Kuva.
Yeah, I got a bit of a specific question, but it should be semi-easy to talk about. So, like, throughout like your like work throughout all this, what is something you like found yourself super proud that you were able to do? You know, something that you like was able to put forward and say, "I'm really glad I was able to make this." Pop your hands up when you're ready. Connor?
So normally when I'm making my renderings, it's really something that only gets seen by the creative team. It's not something that really goes outside of the discussion table. It's sort of, this is what's in my head, this is what I want to put on stage, and I'm going to make it as close as possible to this in the actual theater. I did way more renderings than I would ever have done for any other show for this production, because we used them in the actual final video. And I was actually I tried some new techniques, and I'm really happy with how they came out. And yeah, I think they look pretty good.
Yeah, your work was absolutely excellent as I went through it. Good stuff, man. All right. I don't know whose hand went up first. I'm going to go with Amanda.
Okay, so this was my first time designing a show entirely digitally. Usually I do traditional rendering, so I'll like sit there and watercolor, but this time, given the format, I figured doing everything completely digital was going to be the easiest way to pass information along. And then on top of that, I've been really fine-tuning my Procreate skills because of this project. So it was just a really good like push to keep improving on all of that for me.
Right. And your drawings were absolutely amazing too, just getting to see them for the first time.
Thank you.
Of course. Gabby, you were up next.
Yeah, I actually wasn't sure if I was going to do this project because I wasn't sure if I was like going to be able to do it. I was pretty overwhelmed by the fact that we only had a month to do everything. It was a very condensed process, and I was kind of nervous about doing that. I was like 2 weeks to come up with a concept. It was really scary. And then we're here, and I'm super proud of everything that I've done and everything that everyone else has done. And I'm looking at what I've done, and I'm like, in a month, I've made renderings of 3 different concepts and elevations and draftings and a model. And I'm really excited that that's what I was able to accomplish as my first thing out of school.
And we were all glad to see you signed on. Thank you. All right. Kevin, your turn.
Okay, so my next question, let's get into the meat of things. So I'm just curious, we're going to talk about why do you think queer stories need to be told? In this case, we're telling it in sci-fi. Why do you think they need to be told in all genres? And I'm also curious, why do you think this genre of science fiction that fits very well with queer identities and queer stories? And I know I just asked multiple things, but if you can touch upon any of them, raise your hand. Okay, Amanda.
I'm gonna see if I can word this correctly. So first and foremost, we need more queer stories. Like, period. In mainstream media, there is not enough, and we need more of it. And this is just another step into normalizing the telling of queer stories. And I think putting it into the sci-fi aspect and making the main focus the robot relates it to modern day, because we already have that discussion of, is a robot alive? If it has cognitive thought and has emotions and feelings, is it alive? So that's like the easiest way to kind of relate it into like a modern, like a thought process that already exists, while putting forward something such as like gender identity.
Mm-hmm. Especially what I've noticed with science fiction, a big point of it through history is like putting a mirror to what society is like throughout history. And it really shows people, like, even though it's in the future, it's not that far away, which I think the story does a good job at in capturing. Okay, Connor, I saw your hand up.
Well, I'm going to totally agree with Amanda. Queer stories need to be told. There needs to be more stories by queer writers. There needs to be more stories about queer people in the community. And I think sci-fi in general is a very unique tool to be able to do that. It's been used since, I mean, my favorite example is Star Trek. Gene Roddenberry made it as a way to take these ideas and put them into mainstream media, but with a step removed. You're not being faced with the exact story head on. You sort of have to read between the lines about what's going on. And I think that's exactly sort of what this play does. It takes this idea that we have to tackle and takes it into a sci-fi realm so we can sort of wrap our head around it without confronting the idea head on.
Mm-hmm. Let's go with Elizabeth first.
Just on a basic level, the more you talk about it, the more you normalize it. And I feel like a lot of people don't talk about it because they think it's like uncomfortable, but it's something that doesn't need to be uncomfortable. So like the more we talk about it, the more it's just normal every single day, whatever it is, whoever it is, them, they, everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely is this like barrier of people who like are just afraid of making the wrong step or making or saying things wrong, but it's really, you can't really think like that. You just have to try your best, and if you mess up, just you, especially in the community has to understand that we have to be forgiving towards people who are trying to understand, who are trying to learn, because sometimes people aren't the most forgiving, or it might be the most understanding, but like you have to look at it from both sides really. But I feel like we're working towards on both ends trying to open up the community more and be more forgiving and more just loving in a way, you know. Sure. Okay, Gabby, I saw you had a hand up.
Yeah, I just representation right now is such a big conversation, and I think it's really important to hear and read stories from people who aren't like you, because it broadens your knowledge. Like, why do I want to read someone who's just like me? That's pretty boring. Like, my friends are the most diverse group of people I've ever met, and reading a play and putting on a play that is telling some stories about some of the things that I know people have gone through. I don't know if that was an English sentence, but we're going to go with it. Yeah, it's really great to see, and I'm really honored that I get to showcase some of that and some of the struggles that people go through, because people don't realize like what trans people go through, what marginalized people go through. because they don't see it.
Yeah, I think that was definitely a goal of the season for VTC overall. We're seeing that in the show that came out last week, and I think we're seeing in the shows upcoming and the show itself. So it's been a very fun process. Julia, did you want to add on?
I had something that's a little like off topic from the question, but I also wanted to say with this story specifically, like it's not, I mean it is, but it like isn't a happy ending or whatever. Like, you know, people are presented with information and presented with stories and you know, choose to be compassionate and choose to be accepting, and you know, some people just don't, and that's like a ridiculously upsetting reality. And you know, I think this story showcases how, you know, when given all that you are given, you have a choice to you know, be open and be accepting and loving to people, and how to react to those people who aren't, and just how not okay that is, and people shouldn't have to plead for their life. And this story just really highlights the fact that everyone deserves, you know, acceptance, and they deserve to live their own lives. And yeah, sorry, that was rambly, but
Oh, it was great. Yeah, okay, we'll move on to our next question from Kuvar.
A bit more of an open question on this one. This one has to do with like your freedom on the piece. Did you like how did you explore the freedom you had working not only in Zoom but also not a lot of people have worked on sci-fi pieces as far as I know. So, you know, how did that like affect your design process? How did you like draw inspiration? Probably shouldn't unmute myself. Gabby.
I know at the beginning I was texting Amanda and we go, oh my God, how are we gonna do sci-fi over Zoom? And then I think we each started looking more into it and kind of developing our own concepts. At least I did, and kind of figuring out what we would do in real life, or what I would do in real life. And then it kind of just went from there. And something that we talked about a lot during our production meetings was like, there are no rules. This isn't really something that's been done before. So like, why not fail? Like the goal is to succeed, but if it fails, it fails. Why not try and do something really cool? And I think that's something that I strive to do with theater. And that's something that we try to get taught in our theater. And I wanted to kind of keep going with that. And I kind of took the piece and took my knowledge of sci-fi and my knowledge of queer stories and kind of mashed them together. And I was looking at like the shapes of genitalia to create a stage, and taking that and keep throwing things that way, and taking colors from a pride flag and throwing it that way. And I was kind of taking little aspects from everything and mushing them together, and keep telling myself like, there are no rules, just do what you want creatively and talk with your team and it'll all work out.
Amazing. Anybody else? Oh, let's go, Connor.
So in a way, the freedom was like, it was amazing to have like this incredible blank slate. You know, it's in the future. You don't have to stick to any specific time period. You're sort of making up all the rules as you go. But that is also terrifying because you're making up all of the rules as you go. So it was interesting to try and sort of create rules for us. Okay, what exists in this world? What doesn't? What do we need? What don't we need? How can we best tell this story? And I think we did a great job.
Most definitely, yeah. Amanda, you had your hand up?
So when I started, I forced myself into a rabbit hole, and I just dove straight into what like modern day AI looked like. And then I started looking around with like videos I've watched, games that I've interacted with. My biggest inspiration was Portal. I love that game. It's just amazing. And it was trying to connect all the pieces. And most of what my process was like, let me just try this. If it works, I'm going to keep it. And if it doesn't, I'm just going to like put it somewhere else. And then it worked in the end. I got some pretty great designs.
All right, nice. Well, all your design aspects worked out absolutely amazing. So thanks, guys. Kevin, your turn.
Okay, so have a question that I just kind of came up with because it's been crossing my mind a little bit. But I'm just curious, as we move forward, as we keep working, we're not sure when we'll actually end up working in person, and if we do, how that will end up working out. From just this experience of working on this piece, what will you take away moving forward in your theater career? And just as you move forward ahead, what are you thinking about coming out of this piece? I know that's kind of general, but Elizabeth?
I think it was nice to work with people outside of your bubble, like being like I'm currently in Texas and almost everyone else is in New York. So it's interesting. Our director's from Australia, so that's like very cool coming and working with people that you've never met before. You would not have met in your theater little realm. So I think that was really cool and really beneficial and crossing literal miles.
And also maybe that makes me think about like if we didn't have this experience, like moving forward, maybe it'll inspire us to reach out to people we normally would not reach out with and work with people that we've never worked with before, to not be afraid to like email someone at a random theater across the country that you're interested in, to be like, I'm interested in what you're doing. Can I work with you? Like things like that, because I feel like right now when we're in school, we are trained to just work with the people that we're working with and not try to reach out. But soon we graduate from school and then we have to figure out what the hell we're doing in this theater community, because the theater community is humongous and there's so many people out there. So you really have to try to make those connections. And I think this is a great way to start working on building those connections. I've been thinking about that lately. But yeah, anyone else? Anna?
I can just say through working with VTC as a whole, it's kind of taught me more and more about how not only like driven and compassionate that theater people are, but just how like we can take these kind of moments where you don't really know what's going to happen and try to create something completely new out of it, whether it isn't an artistic concept or whether it's just in this weird moment of time that we've kind of found ourselves in. I'm so like inspired by the spirit of everybody that is involved in this company, and just in how everyone is so willing to collaborate and create something. But not only that, there's this spirit of compassion that kind of flows through the work, because it's people being open and accepting to this new circumstance that we're being forced to kind of work in. And I feel like that's going to tether out later on in our careers as professionals, and then later into time in the industry at proper, just kind of knowing that we've had this weird growing experience of kind of having to be resolute and continue creating, even when times kind of make it seem like that's not going to happen. So I think it's definitely been like a very inspiring experience, and there's a lot to take from everyone that you're working with, not even what you yourself are doing.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else want to touch upon that a little bit, or? Nope. Okay, we'll move on to our next question.
This one's a bit of a direct question for you, Julia, actually. Yeah, your character, they didn't have a name and they didn't really have much of a background. So how did you sort of give that character, life on the actual theater?
Angelica did a really great exercise at one rehearsal where she just asked us a ton of questions, like, if your character was a song, what song would it be? If your character was a piece of clothing, what clothing would they be? And it was like rapid fire questions, and you just put whatever you think it is in the moment. And then, I would put down an answer and I'd be like, oh, well, why did I put that down? Oh, it's because she's cold and she's mean. That's why I put that down. And so I think there was a lot of character development and character work and like history of the character before for all of us. And I really think that was amazing and really helpful. And yeah. And I don't know if she needed a name. It's there's a lot to her. And also, with being like the bad guy, you always have to like justify the bad guy, and so that was really interesting.
Right.
Yeah, Angelica's a genius and asked us really great questions that made me really think about why is she doing this? Why is she saying this? You know, it was really cool.
All right. And from everything I've seen, you've made it work out wonderfully. Gavin, your turn.
Okay, I'm just curious, how are we doing time-wise? Because I got one more question.
You know, Zoom has not pinged me that this meeting is about to run out of time, so let's just milk it for
Well,
what we
I got a
can.
notification that it's unlimited time,
Yeah,
so
I just got a notification. We're on unlimited
We're
time.
we're still going, fam. Let's keep rolling.
I only have
Okay.
2 more questions. Okay.
Okay, let's see. Because do I want to come up with something random or do I want to ask the question that I've written? I don't know. I think I want to come up with something more fun that like could be an iffy question, but whatever. I'm just curious. So this is a 10-minute piece. It's consolidated into this very short story. Where do you see, what did you imagine beforehand happening or after happening in this story? For any of you, just for fun. I don't know. I know this is very creative, but okay, Kana.
So, I mean, it delves into it a little bit in the piece. You sort of get the backstory of the professor's child and where the LR series originates. And I mean, you have the number of the LR robots, so obviously this has happened over some time. And I mean, robots can't be cheap, so the professor had to have accumulated some sort of wealth over a decent amount of time. Enough to build a factory for building robots, which is where our play takes place, on the sort of assembly line of the fabrication of these robots. So I think it was really interesting sort of piecing it together and figuring all that out, and then sort of building the world around that to expand and encompass everything that we created.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's cool to hear you guys hear that thought process, even though I don't know if all of us really ever really discuss that as a whole, like beforehand. You get a lot of that in the script itself, but it's cool to hear about that. Okay, Gabby?
I mean, just speaking directly to like beforehand, afterhand, kind of going off what Connor was saying, like in the design itself, like there's a before and after as part of the space. Like there are doors leading that would be leading to places. And so I think we always knew, like while we were talking about the concept, like, yes, this could be before, this could be after, but I think we kind of all kept like exactly what we thought would happen, like to ourselves, like our own little personal, like this is why.
Yeah, I did have a conversation with the playwright Cesario about this, about how they really imagined it being just this kind of obscure ending. Like the ending doesn't, like you can all imagine what could happen, but it's really about that moment at the end of them holding hands and going out into the world and not knowing where it could go, but hopefully when you have someone by your side, like you'll be able to do it together and really just go out into the world, because it's sometimes a scary thing to do that. And I don't know, it's a very emotional, inspiring ending, and I hope that comes across when we see the piece. Yeah. Elizabeth?
Just like on an abstract, because you just made my brain think, like the robot in the piece says stuff about black and white, about humans seeing in black and white. So like in my head, I see the show going from black and white to like a rainbow. Like that's how I always pictured it. So yeah, fun little abstract thought.
Yeah, I did imagine that, like in early conversations we had about developing the design, about maybe talking about how do we ground the show into reality, because we wanted to have these big futuristic designs, but how do we remind the audience that this is a play that takes place pretty much today, but it's still like we wanted to still bring those futuristic elements to really bring sci-fi forward, because it is a sci-fi piece ultimately. So that's a fun thing to think about after the fact when we had these very early on conversations about that. But yeah, anyone else? Or okay, we'll move on to our next question.
Sort of piggybacking off of Kevin there. Like early on in the design process, everyone had like thoughts of what we wanted, what we really wanted to see, like up in the Zoom play or whatever. Like, but like what shifted? You know, what changed? What made you think, you know, I don't know if this is going to work, or man, I really wish this happened, but I just don't think it's going to work out? Any thoughts on that? No, Connor.
I hate always being first. But I really, initially, I was like, all right, a sci-fi piece. Let's go full future. You know, I want flying cars, teleportation. I want Portal on a stage. And, you know, I really had to sort of rein myself back from that as time went on. I'm like, you know what, we know we do have to ground it in reality. We need the audience to be able to relate to the piece. It needs to be similar enough to our current time that, you know, they can place themselves in it, but far enough away that they can sort of imagine that it's a far off reality that they can sort of distance themselves from while still absorbing the message. So that was a little heartbreaking, but I think we really accomplished what we set out to do, and we gave it a nice futuristic feel, which I'm really happy with.
Gabby.
So my first rendering, the first thing that I ever showed Angelica was a stage that was a runway leading to like a hexagonal shape. And it was a mix of like a nut or a bolt and a penis. And I kind of based it off of the show Sex Education. They did Romeo and Juliet the musical, and their stage was a giant penis. And like the whole show was hypersexual. And I don't know why, but I was like really into it. I was like really leaning into the idea of like half showcasing genitals, I guess, like really pushing like how as a society we like think genitals are really important to your gender, and like they're not. Let's just get that out there. But I thought it would be really cool to have a penis stage, just like for my own satisfaction as a designer, and for the fact that it went really well with the story itself. It did not work with our concept, but I'm happy where we ended up. But that was like a small thing that I'm like, oh, okay, I guess.
Right. Anybody else? Any other thoughts on it? No? All right. Kevin, your turn. I'm out of questions.
I am also out of questions, but so am I allowed to wrap it up, Anna?
Wrap it up. Go for it.
Okay. So first of all, we'd like to thank our panel for participating. Thank you guys. Good work, everyone. And also make sure if you haven't watched the piece to watch the piece. And also donate to Gender Spectrum. It's a great foundation that we're fundraising for. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you, everyone.